Ready? Let's go. So, acorde. This video is basically going to be an overview of Irish spelling, tiny, tiny comments on proper Irish pronunciation, and at the end I'm going to talk about different ways of reading Irish pronunciation, all topics that I'm going to do longer videos on in the future, just to basically give a foundation, an introduction to everything I'm going to talk about in the next few over the next few days. So, first thing, surprisingly, that I'm going to say is when it comes to Irish spelling, Irish is obviously written with an alphabet, right? In over the last 100 years, Irish has just been written with regular fonts, regular Latin text, right? That's fine. But there also used to be an older Irish script, the Gaelic script, right? You can still find things to type with that online. There were a few differences. It basically looked like this, and I'm going to make a video about that as well. So, the Irish alphabet is essentially the same as the English alphabet, the Latin alphabet, without the use of J, K, Q, V, W, X, Y, Z, right? They don't exist naturally in the Irish language except in loan words, right? So obviously, you have words like violin, names like, if your name's Jake, you can't really do anything about that. X-ray is X-raw. But anyway, so that leaves us in Irish with only 18 letters, right? Which isn't that many. And however many, 26 letters works fine for Latin, but is really terrible for Irish because Irish has actually 33 consonant sounds. Now forget letters. Consonant sounds, actual sounds that you produce. Irish has 33 of them. Like, to highlight the difference, English has 24 consonant sounds. So that includes, in English, th, sh, ch. You get the gist. Actually, no. Irish has at least 33 consonant sounds in other dialects, and depending on how native your pronunciation is, it's at least 33. Anyway, so in order to get past that issue of 18 letters for 33 consonant sounds, we needed to add some new rules, right? So the reason we have so many consonant sounds is that every consonant in Irish, this is my message to the world, because once you know this, you'll start to research and your pronunciation will improve. Every consonant in Irish comes in a pair of two. One broad and one slender, right? So those words will be mentioned in the classroom in Irish, but it's never really properly explained to you. So every single consonant comes in a pair, one broad, one slender. That means there's a slender B, a broad B. There's a slender F and a broad F. There's a slender, I don't know, anything. Literally think of it. You name it. Slender L, broad L. And all of them, all of those consonants are different to the pronunciations that you'll find in English, right? So if you're using English consonants or English pronunciation while speaking Irish, I mean, it sounds stupid to say out loud, but 99% of learners won't know this and they will just use English pronunciation, right? The way I think of it is, when Americans learn Spanish and they're all like, hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿Todo bien? That is basically how Irish is treated. So if you speak Irish with the exact same accent that you would have when you speak English, there are improvements to be made, major improvements to be made. So, like, you'll get it in schools. Almost every teacher has just poor pronunciation, and it's the worst in Dublin. If you have a Blanche girly who sounds like, oh my god, I fucking love my laboo fucking whatever, and she speaks Irish and she says, oh my yeah, Conic me, mo madra fucking and yay agus, like, it's even lum ma mommy, whatever. That isn't anywhere close to correct pronunciation. It's simply not correct. And so I say it's not hard. It does take time, but after a week or two of understanding the correct sounds that are present in Irish, understanding that 90% of the sounds in English can't be used in native Irish speech, then you'll start to improve. So, yeah, the only consonant, actually, moving on, back on track, the only consonant sound that Irish and English share exactly the same is H. H, which is just breathing, obviously. H. So H is the same in English and Irish, right? But other than that, they're all different. So that brings me to the spelling of broad and slender consonants. So obviously, I'm going to make more videos. I'm going to deep dive into how exactly to pronounce, let's say, for example, a broad B versus a slender B, highlighting how they're different to the English, showing that they, they are different. They're unique sounds, but that's for another time. When it comes to spelling purely, a broad consonant is written beside, so on either side, is written beside what we call broad vowels, A, O, and U, right? Easy. And a slender consonant is written beside what we call slender vowels, I and E. So this is similar to the English, how English treats C and G. So C is pronounced one way if it's beside A, O, U, as in cat, corn, culture, versus scent and circus, right? It's a similar thing, except in Irish, it has to have that spelling beside certain vowels has to happen on both sides of the consonant, right? So, if I can think of a good example, Asian, Ireland, is spelt E followed I, and then or EANN. So the or is slender, and because of that, on either side, you'll only find slender vowels. If, let's say, you left out the let's say you left out the I, or let's say you left out the E, then according to the spelling rule, you wouldn't be able to tell whether it was a broad or a slender or, because there's both types of vowels on either side, which isn't allowed, right? This also leads to, even in the word Asian, I think, but in so many thousands of Irish words, there are vowel letters, so A, E, I, O, U, letters that are inserted into words that historically were never pronounced, right? So you go back hundreds of years, thousands of years, these vowel sounds weren't actually there, but they're just within the word as a hinting vowel to show, to act as a reminder that the consonant beside that letter is broad or slender, right? So I really should have come with some examples. Well, it's similar to the English guide, right? If you think of the word guide, Guide, what is actually being pronounced there is a G sound, the sound I, and then the end of the word duh, right? So in a way, the word could survive by itself as being spelled Gide, but according to the English spelling rules, a G beside an I can never be pronounced G. So if you like to think of it in this way, a U is being inserted into the spelling of the word as a reminder that the G isn't pronounced soft. So let me think of an example of an Irish word. Yeah. So this is my little fuck Lloyd polka, and if you look, this word is spelled FOCLO for the I, or, right? So we can tell instantly by the spelling whether or not we know how to pronounce these consonants perfectly. We know instantly by the spelling it's a broad F, a broad C, a broad L, because they're flanked by a broad vowel, and then ending with a slender or, right? Because the or is flanked by a slender vowel, right? And then in the word polka, the P is broad and the C is broad, right? That wasn't the end of it. That I, letter I, never actually was pronounced in the language. So instead, what the spelling opts for is to insert an I to show that basically to hint that the consonant beside the I is pronounced slenderly. Easy beans, right? Another thing about that word that you've seen, which is very important in Irish, is a little accent, right? So that accent, the native term for that accent is Sheena or Sheena Fada, which means long symbol. Most people just refer to it as a fada, which is the Irish word for long, right? It's very easy. Any vowel that has a fada on it is pronounced long. And I'm going to go into that in another video. We also have less double letters than English, but sometimes you will see either double N, double L, or double R, and they can affect the vowels around them. And that's all I say. I would love to say more, but I need to cut this down. So, the next concept of Irish spelling is mutations, right? It's probably one of the hardest things about Irish grammar at all. So, a mutation is, to put it simply, a change in the sound of a consonant, right? So, Irish has two main types of mutation, right? One called lenition and one called eclipsis. Within a word, right? So, like in the middle or the end of a word, if a mutation is present, it's permanent, right? It's not going to change. That's just the pronunciation of a word. So any example would do. Let's say the word for dark, dorcha. So that C, right, has been lenited. So we spell it as, in the modern spelling, CH. Lenition basically means softening. Uru or eclipsis is more complicated. So, yes, in the word dorcha, the CH is permanent, right? But at the beginning of a word, depending on the context that the word is in, right, within the sentence, it can be either on the lenition or eclipsis can either be on or off. Get me? So if you see lenition in the middle or the end of a word, so anything written with a H, BH, MH, PH, FH, CH, GH, DH, TH, SH, anywhere else in the word, that's permanent, right? That can't change. But at the start of a word, it just depends on the context. So I'll give a really quick example. The word mo means my, right? And mo always lenites or softens a consonant, the first consonant of the word that follows, right? So if I have, we'll keep going with the letter C. If I have, what's a word that starts with ko? Coat. So if I have, the Irish word for coat is cóta. By itself, the word is cóta, right? And if I have my coat, that's mo chóta, right? So because the context being mo, the first consonant changes. And lenition is easy to understand because it's easy to say lenition is the softening of a consonant, right? You can hear that obviously ch is a softer sound than k, but lenition is also harder because there's a lot more rules, a lot more contexts to memorize than for eclipsis. Eclipsis, I could explain in maybe 15 minutes. I think there's like 10 or 15 contexts for eclipsis, Um, whereas for lenition, there's definitely over 30. At least it's not over 100. So you should be grateful. Yes, so that's me talking about mutations. Moving on. So related to that, related to lenition, right? As I said, in the middle of a word or at the end of a word, lenited consonants are permanent, right? But some of the pronunciations of lenited consonants have been there for so long that they actually have just become pronounced as vowels. That sounds really complicated. I'll explain it with a quick example in English with the word bought, right? So obviously you learn in English that a G is pronounced G, right? But OUGH isn't pronounced og, isn't pronounced og. The consonant there, even though there's a consonant letter, isn't pronounced anymore, right? It's just a rule that OUGH is pronounced aw. And this happens all the time in Irish. Just to give some quick examples, ADH isn't pronounced ag or ag or ad or anything. It's pronounced I. So when I was practicing getting consonants to be pronounced right, I took the fact that DH was pronounced R and I ran with it, and I started pronouncing it in every word. Where I was wrong was that I forgot, or I didn't know that there's loads of these consonant vowel combinations that are pronounced just as open vowel sounds, right? Another one is OGH or OGHA, which is pronounced, in Munster at least, O. So you get words like toe, or in other dialects, toe, which means great. Yeah, moving on. So I'm just gonna run quickly through this because it's a lot. The last thing that you need to know about Irish spelling is sometimes there are quite big clusters of consonants, right? So L, N, and or often come right beside other consonants within words, right? And when this happens, what you often end up with to ease pronunciation is a tiny vowel that isn't written in between, right? So let's say this word, the Irish word for fist is spelled like this, DORN, right? But it's not pronounced durn as you might in English. The cluster or N, right? Because there's an or there, to make the pronunciation easier, you add a little vowel sound, so it's pronounced durn, or with the word for blue, same thing. A little vowel sound is added there, so it's not pronounced gurm or gurm. It's pronounced gurm. So sometimes words that look like they're one syllable will actually be two, right? And it won't be written. Yeah. So next, when it comes to capital letters, it's similar to English. Place names, proper nouns, people, languages all get capital letters. And the only thing that's really different is when there's a mutation on the first consonant of a noun that has a capital. That capital letter stays capital, right? So we have something like, again, I'm going to use an easy example, na haten. So na will give a H sound to any word that begins with a vowel, which includes Asian, which means of Ireland, right? But Ireland is obviously a place name, it's a proper noun, so even though technically the H is beginning the word, the ifada stays capitalized, right? There's also rules for if all of the letters are capitalized. Sometimes what you can do is have small caps for mutations, which I think looks really unique and stylistic. Anyway, the next topic is dictionaries. So how do dictionaries write their pronunciations, right? Something you won't often be taught. The approach is really simple, but it has a lot of issues. It has a lot of benefits, but it also has a lot of issues, I think. So dictionaries basically will, for their vowels, it's quite easy. Any long vowel, instead of being written with a fada, will have this colon-like symbol after the vowel to show that it's long, which is that's just an international sort of standard. And when it comes to consonants, slender consonants are written with this sort of sideways dash afterwards. So a broad B will be written just with nothing, and a slender B will be written with this dash, right? Now there's two issues that I have with this. One, this dash, slender dash, looks really, really similar to the stress symbol, which is also really important in Irish. Stress is just emphasis on a syllable. I'm going to talk about that another time. But yeah, so they look too similar. It's not clear enough, and also that means you're leaving the broad consonants unmarked, right? As if they have no substance to them, right? So this is the main reason why in my videos, I'm going to use the IPA pronunciation symbols, which I'll just call pronunciation symbols for as a layman's term, right? But broad consonants have different pronunciation to English, and slender consonants also have a different pronunciation to English. So why would you mark only one of them? Why would you say, okay, this sound has been slenderized whereas the broad sounds have also been broadened, if you will, right? Um, when I talk about what actually makes broad consonants broad and slender consonants slender, this will make more sense. Another issue is, which is probably the origin for using the slender dash, is because Irish dictionaries were made so long ago, they only wanted to use symbols that are readily available to them, right? Now we have computers, right? We can do whatever we like, but they basically used most of the same symbols that would also be used to explain English pronunciation, right? So, first and most egregious example is F and V. The Irish sounds that a dictionary would describe as F sounds and V sounds are nothing like English F and V sounds, right? So, you know, when dictionaries first came out, they would basically say, if at all, people who really knew about Irish pronunciation would understand in the small writing that even though these sounds are being written with the English letters V and F, they're actually not pronounced similar at all, right? But if you're just a learner and you don't know any better, you're going to pick up a dictionary, you're going to look at the pronunciation, and you're going to say, okay, well, this is pronounced with a V, 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 and this is pronounced with an F, 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 whereas actually they should be, which I'm going to get into, v and f, right? Yes, which are completely different sounds. But the benefits are that within the circle of making a standard like spelling for Irish pronunciation, it meant that there are symbols for every sound in Irish. So if you look up a website like Fuamana, you can list every sound in Irish, and like easily go through sound files. Which, yes, that's one benefit, but otherwise, is it really that great? No. So that brings me to, what dictionaries should you use and how? Especially when it comes to pronunciation. So, oh yeah, I forgot. One more issue that dictionaries have with their pronunciation symbols is that Irish, like English does, can have quite long consonant clusters anywhere in a word. So, like, some English words start with stra, S-T-R. That's 3 consonants in a row. Same with English, or same with Irish. And if a cluster like that, let's say B or, if that or was slender, the dictionaries would basically have a slender dash after the or, and then allow the reader to assume that the B is also slender, right? Which is bullshit, because then you're spelling what is a slender B with the same symbol as a broad B. And it's just like, it's so easy to just go, okay, B dash slender B, or dash slender or, done. Now there's no confusion. You're saving like 1 second of writing a symbol. And it's especially important because, you know, there's more complicated rules when it comes to S and when it comes to or, and sometimes in consonant clusters that have an S or an or in it, you can have a broad consonant followed by a slender consonant, or a slender consonant followed by a broad consonant. And, you know, if every consonant isn't marked, it's just not clear to the learner what's happening. And you shouldn't force your learners to assume what, you know, pronunciation is happening where. So I'll give a quick example. The word hospital, right, means hospital. And because of more complex spelling rules, which I haven't gotten into, which I will, the S is broad, pronounced so, but the P is slender, pronounced P, right? And if I wrote that in a dictionary, I'd have OSP dash, which makes me assume that everything before that dash is slender, which it isn't, right? It's just, you know, it's just poor. Anyway, so that's my gripes. So yes, anyway, what dictionaries to use? What dictionaries to avoid? There's definitely many sources to avoid, right? Other people like Patchy, who's one of my many inspirations, have made videos discouraging learners or encouraging learners away from certain sources who teach the wrong sounds, who don't know anything about Irish pronunciation. And I mean, I could talk about that all day, but with dictionaries it's a little bit of a different story, because most of them are fine. I mean, most of them are just lists of words, right? But you need to know how to utilize them properly. So yeah, any dictionary that's a book is probably fine, right? Just be aware of what system of pronunciation symbols that they're using, because sometimes, as I explained, they'll make decisions that makes it easier for them to type, but harder for you to realize that, you know, what exact sounds are being used. If you like an old dictionary that uses less standardized spellings, Dineen's dictionary is famous. It's brilliant. It isn't scared to use like really deeply important indigenous Irish words that have long definitions and that are really specific and really interesting, like words that wouldn't exist in any other country. Whereas, you know, this folklore polka, like, it's just meant to be basic, and you wouldn't find anything other than words that you've heard about before. So really recommend Dineen's dictionary. The main two online websites are Tonglan and Folklore, and they're both made by the same people from the same sources. The first thing I'll say is the audio files on both websites, they share the same audio files, are most of the time abysmal, right? They really aren't accurate. They say they're from native speakers, but they really just are poor, and they should be avoided. But everything else pretty much is quite good. Another gripe that I have with both websites equally is they never explain. There's no explanation of where words come from or where words are used, right? So most dialects of Irish, which I will explain how many there are in later videos, most dialects of Irish have unique words that only exist in their dialect, right? You know, what's even worse about it is they'll have certain words in their dictionaries that only exist in one dialect, and then they'll have speakers from all three dialects pronouncing the words, right? So let's say the word for soap. There's three words for soap for the three major dialects, right? So in Ulster they say something like sopa. Connacht they say something like galajach, and then in Munster they say something like galúnach. But so if you look at the word soap, all three of these words will be beside each other, right? But then with the pronunciation, all three speakers will be able to pronounce, will have an audio file for all three words. Whereas what they should have instead is sopa, Ulster Irish only, galajach, Connacht Irish only, galúnach, Munster Irish only. Because you won't find an Ulster speaker that uses the word galúnach. The pronunciation simply doesn't exist in that dialect. You know? It's simple. It's like if I had, well, I mean, obviously, you know, they are able to pronounce those words in their dialect. That's why the audio files are there, but it's not accurate to what is actually being used. If I was a learner and I didn't know any better, I could open up that website. I could search up the word soap. I could read the first word I see, sopa, and then go along my merry way. But if I'm trying to learn Munster Irish, then I've, you know, learned something that I shouldn't have, and that's poor. So you have to watch out for that. Definitely just don't use the audio files at all. Most of them, you know, still use English pronunciation. The grammar is good on Tonglan. You know, both of them are quite quick, like they have good computing power, and they give you all the information. Except, again, Standard Irish is made up, right? It only gives Standard Irish grammar, only gives, or no, most of the time it gives Standard Irish words, and yeah. So you just need to watch out for that if you're trying to learn a specific dialect, which you should. You should try learn. Pick one dialect, be as specific as possible to the place, and go head first into, you know, with being suspicious of everything, because you know you'll come across these websites that give you words, give you pronunciations that just might not exist in your dialect. And that's basically it. Also, avoid AI. So AI, as we know, takes information from massive databases, right, and uses that to make paragraphs to spit back to you. ChatGPT, Google AI now, It's everywhere. But the online data of the Irish language is actually so small, and even when it does exist, the language can be quite complicated, that at the point that AI is now, it doesn't understand how to explain Irish properly. So literally, whenever I look up anything about Irish on Google, the AI answer comes first, obviously, which you should be able to switch off. And 80 to 90% of the time, the answer is wrong, and very clearly wrong. It literally, AI does not know what it's talking about when it comes to Irish, because the data that it's basing it off, the websites that the AI has access to, there's just not enough information, right? So be wary of AI. Oh yes, and if you're trying to learn Munster Irish at all, but especially Cork Irish, there is a Cork Irish dictionary. Look it up; it's right there, and it's the holy grail. It really is amazing. There's also Put the Fuckle, which is all right. It kind of goes into more detail about words. And it's useful. I think I've seen Ulster Irish dictionaries as well. Yeah, try get dialect specific sources, and you'll be fine. And just be honest that about everything you find. Try and be able to filter what pronunciations are correct, what vocabulary finding, which dialect does it actually come from, and what software you're using, and whether it actually knows what it's talking about. And terrible way to end the video, but unfortunately I have to say that's it, and that's just the basics, and I'll be deep diving into everything else next. Sinead Slán.